Welcome, everyone. We're about to start our first live webinar. We're going to wait for 1 minute to allow for more participants to refresh their screen and join us. And while we're waiting, I'd like to remind the participants that are already watching us live to please scroll down and click yes to the survey that you're watching live so that you can receive extra points. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first live session of the Social Entrepreneurship for Innovation in Health course. This course is part of Making More Health Initiative, a partnership between Ashoka and Boehringer Ingelheim. Making More Health explores innovative pathways to improve access to healthcare for people, animals, and communities around the world. And in this course, participants connect with a global community of health professionals from across the private, public, and nonprofit sectors to convene and learn entrepreneurial strategies to create social impact and business impact in the health and wellness space. My name is Nathalie Zuniga. I'm one of your course facilitators. This webinar will cover Module 1 of the course, titled The Business Case of Social Entrepreneurship. And to cover this topic, I have here with me our guest expert, Florencia Strade. Florencia is member of the Board of Directors and co-founder of the League of Entrepreneurs. The League is an international community of impact innovators inside some of the most influential private and public institutions. Florencia is passionate about people finding meaning at work and collective leadership. She spent over a decade working inside large corporations like ABN AMRO Bank and McKinsey & Company. Florencia, it's a real pleasure to have you here today with us. Thank you so much for joining us one more time.
Thank you, Natalie. It's always a pleasure. I love this program, and especially I love the commitment for so many years in making this happen for thousands of people around the world. So yeah, it's a big pleasure for me. I really enjoy it. And I come here always with the expectation to contribute in whatever way I can, because for some people, it's the first time listening to the word entrepreneur or finding their way. And I have been over a decade going deep into that. So that's my intention here.
Wonderful. And yes, it's true. Like this course is the 19th version of the course, which we're very excited. It's going to be like 10 years since we launched. And we have had you many, many times participating as a guest expert, and we are always excited to have you back again. So because you're so experienced, we would love to hear about your professional background to start. So if you can share with us a little bit about your social entrepreneur and social entrepreneur journey and the work that you do with the League of Entrepreneurs, that'll be wonderful. Thank you so much, Florencia.
Sure. I guess as I get older, I'm like, how my story, 10 years, as you mentioned, I did work in the corporate world, in banking and management consulting. And I was inside the big corporate system, but already I think that came very early on for me, questioning about why do we do business the way do we do it? Can't we think in a way? So it was something that I didn't have articulated with good language probably at that time, but there was this question around why can't we just not only make money, but also have more consciousness on the impact. And access was a big issue for me since the beginning. Like, why can't more people have access to what we were doing, either on banking or imagine working in McKinsey consultancy, like super expensive. And for me, it was like, how can we just put all of this talent and capacity to solve real world issues and not just support big corporations in getting more profitable? So that was very early on part of my questioning. And I think that's important, which is, where is that energy coming from? And for each of us, it's from different places, but just being conscious and just being connected to that place that you are wanting to change or wanting to question things. it was very early on in my career, and as an entrepreneur, I didn't call myself that way. I was many times tagged as a little bit of a rebel, or like, why are you asking so many questions? Or, but as I was creating my space inside uh, the corporation, I think that's important as people start trusting you. I started to find places where I could develop new things. So in the bank, we worked with internet banking and to access to students that could have loans. And that was part of my entrepreneurial path. In McKinsey, it was more actually working a lot with the Ashoka fellows. So it was great because for me, it was a moment on how can we link all this intelligence with social entrepreneurs. And there were already initiatives going on and just helped make them bigger in Brazil at that time. And also, how can we start a social sector office inside McKinsey? So I was part, and just important, it was not me with my big idea. It was just like me, very connected to what I wanted to do, and just finding other people in the organization that were, uh, I would say, in the same energy or questioning. So that was my path. After 10 years doing that, I started feeling like I wanted to explore beyond. And I have to say, there was a bit of a limit in what was possible within the institution I was working in. Therefore, I jumped out and started my entrepreneurial path. And that is when I started, okay, I'm going to create social enterprises and companies that have impact. And the idea was two things in the beginning was working with entrepreneurs. So it was let's support people that are starting from scratch, that have an idea, that can have impact, and how can we support with accelerating them. So it was an accelerator, incubator, if you want to call it, for new ideas. And then the other company was a consultancy for large corporates that wanted to change and didn't know how. And actually, the concept was the consultancy made money because we charged the large corporates. And then with the money we made, we supported the startup side. Um, so that was the concept we had in how to work with the ecosystem. As that went by, for me, what I realized was it's not about working with the companies, but who inside those companies is really willing to make the change and the shift. And that was when the intrapreneur concept and the intrapreneur initiative and the league started. Because it was like, wow, what if we just work in supporting those individuals inside the large institutions that want to drive the change? Yeah, and I can explore more of that, but I have to say that's for me my biggest passion, which is like if we connect the people inside the large institutions, powerful, influential institutions that want to drive the change, and also recognize and connect with the entrepreneurs that are outside the large institutions, also driving the change, that ecosystem is what we need to do the systems change. So we need to work on both. Here we're talking more about intrapreneurs. I guess in my experience, I have been working with intrapreneurs for 10 years now, calling them intrapreneurs. And it's still a place that I am surprised. And I see people being surprised saying, wow, I didn't think about myself as an entrepreneur. Or we don't have as much of a supporting ecosystem for that, for those individuals. I think like we have developed a lot for entrepreneurs, and then there are incubators and accelerators and courses and sometimes for those inside there's a little bit of that sense of am I not being courageous enough to just leave and do my stuff. uh, and and actually no, like I actually feel like that is the biggest gap we have today for the big change and for the systems change. Working more consciously as entrepreneurs.
Totally. And you're doing an amazing work with the League of Entrepreneurs, providing that network and of support for the entrepreneurs, and also giving them the sense of identity that you were just mentioning, of like, this is what I do, this is who I am. I'm an entrepreneur. And but it's true that there's a lot more support and a lot more studies and things done for social entrepreneurs versus social entrepreneurs. Which brings me to the next question, which is, in order to lay out the foundations of this conversation, I would love for you to explain or further develop into the difference of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, so that everybody is very clear with the difference and what are the advantages of one, the disadvantages, and also like the characteristics of each person. If you can tell us a little bit.
I guess the main difference is you are sitting, the entrepreneur, you are an employee inside an organization. And that is important, like just in terms of format. The entrepreneur, you are starting something from your will, looking for investment, and just creating a new structure. While if you're an entrepreneur, you are inside an existing institution, I would say usually employed. I mean, at least today you can say there are some more creative relationships sometimes inside institutions, but still, you are sitting inside an institution or you are working from that institution, which is one thing that has been quite interesting in the league. As you're saying, we have entrepreneurs from many different institutions, and and all of them with, I mean, you don't have a position as an entrepreneur. No one is called entrepreneur. Though in the last 4 years, I've seen a few people having that name in their position, which is quite interesting. And if you go today on LinkedIn, just make that exercise and you search for entrepreneurs, people are self-defining as entrepreneurs. But in essence, is you are creating something from within an existing organization. I like to say that in the league, this phrase has stuck, which is you are sitting inside that institution, but you don't feel you work for the institution. You work from the institution.
Big
And that
difference.
is very different, right? It's not that I'm working for you and this is my job description. It's I'm sitting in this platform. I know how to work on this platform, but I'm working from it for the world, for what's needed. And that is also a different way of positioning your work. I would say from a mindset perspective and your intention, you shift that focus or that intention. Now, looking into the differences, I have a slide that I think, a couple of images that I think can reinforce when we talk about the difference, and I'm gonna bring them here. So let me put here just share.
Perfect.
In essence, you can see it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So in essence, let's think about bringing new things into the world, right? So we're talking about health access and how bringing more access to health and well-being. So usually all these things start from a discomfort. Like you are saying, there's something that's not right. Some people should be having access and are not having it. And usually this is coming from activism or consciousness or NGOs or collectives, just doing something to solve the problem. Because since the current system, the way it's structured with the current hospitals and private institutions and health insurance and pharma and all of that, is not really solving the issue for certain groups of people, then someone starts trying to do it. And usually this comes in more of, yes, some activism and some moving the needle, and entrepreneurs. Who are the first ones that jump in? Someone trying to create something from the margins, from the fringes, the way it can be solved in a way that you start a new distribution system, a new way of doing it, or get donated uh, pharma and medications that you can give. Great. What happens? You are already moving the needle and you're making big changes happen, but the system hasn't changed. And that is when the social entrepreneur has a fundamental role, which is we're saying we are doing a leap in that change, bringing the powerful institutions, the influential institutions, that if you look at it from the concentration of money and of power that we have today in large corporations, in public institutions as well. If you don't change the way hospitals work, if you don't change the way big corporations develop the solutions and the technology, then it's not going to change the access for everyone. So social entrepreneurs have a very important role in that space. And that means, of course, you can bring new innovations from inside institutions. But also a lot of the role of social entrepreneurs, just open your radar to what's going on outside. The big role of an entrepreneur is to not only follow what your organization is doing, but actually being connected outside your organization and making those bridges on what's possible, what could be scaled, what could happen to really make a change. So with that in mind, I also think like when we start looking at what can I do? No, what can I do as an entrepreneur? And another frame that we use a lot that can be helpful is your sweet spot as an entrepreneur. Let me try to move on to the next. That for some, there we go. The sweet spot for an entrepreneur is really matching, and let's start below. There are lots of societal and customer needs, right? So it's societal problems that need to be solved that can become a customer need. So that you can think of it as a solution that you can bring, that is sustainable, that you can offer as a service or as a product. And then you connect that with your passion and gifts. What stuff that you care about, that you want to make happen, that you could contribute because of your knowledge, your career, your capacities. Great. If you're an entrepreneur, you just need to match the two below. So
Right.
if you're an entrepreneur, you just match your passion and gifts with the societal and customer needs. If you're an entrepreneur, you have to make that third circle work. How does that work with your organization's strategic objectives? And then if you're able to connect your organization's strategy, not only social responsibility and the 1% that we contribute through a foundation or whatever. No, your strategic objectives, like your business objectives, with the two below, then that is the sweet spot for entrepreneurs. And what does it mean then for an entrepreneur? You're not as free as an entrepreneur, but at the same time, you're counting with lots of resources from day one. You have lots of people inside the organization, you have money, and of course, just we always have that conversation in the league, which is you're not putting your financial risk. That's important. An entrepreneur, you're putting your financial risk. You don't have a salary. So onus and bonus, right? Like sometimes as entrepreneurs, you don't feel as free. But at the same time, because you have those limits of your organization, or I always say, if you're an entrepreneur, you need to convince some people in your organization. That if they don't support you as sponsors, they're going to block you. So, if you're an entrepreneur, you go and look for investment in this place, and then another place, and then another place. And if these people say no, you can just go and turn around and find new investors or new supporters. In the case of an entrepreneur, what we have explored is, and we can go deeper into that if that makes sense, is you need to build your muscle to influence people inside your organization. And you need to dedicate a lot of time to that. So that's part of your job. That's part of your work and your leadership. So yeah, and that takes time. We even have this phrase, which is learning to navigate the political system in your organization. When I think of it personally, I used to be the ones that would say, forget political things. Like, I just want to do the work. I just want to see the impact. This makes sense. And there is a business case for it. Well, not necessarily just the business case, but you need to navigate the political system. So that's interesting if we go deeper, like build the business case and navigate the political system to influence in the right way.
Perfect. And regarding to what you were just sharing with us about how important it is to influence the political system and gain that buy-in from other team members, we actually have a question from Lily Piñeros that is saying there are solo entrepreneurs. Do you know if there are any solo entrepreneurs?
Well, it's an interesting question. I personally don't believe in solo entrepreneurs. But it's not that there are not. But because, I mean, in essence, what you're saying is, can someone start from your own idea with your own concept and just do it within an institution? You can. Actually, I've seen cases of people being given a blank sheet and just starting something on their own and just getting some budget. But my point is, very early on, you need to have other people supporting you inside the institution. If not, what has happened in my experience, looking at people that are very solo entrepreneurs, that becomes John's project, Susie's project. So people refer to the project inside the institution with the name of the person. And then I always say, personally, if that happens for me, when I see that happen, my first feedback to that person is, it needs to be called another way. You cannot be in the front, and you should put other people on the front, because if not, it will never be an institutional project.
Right.
And the chances that it's going to die the day you leave, or the day some people change that are giving you blank card and green card, is very big.
Right.
So, yes, you can start on your own with an idea. But if you don't make that idea institutional, I mean, many times I talk with entrepreneurs that it's interesting, like they just laugh about it, but they say, it's my biggest work has been to leave my ego outside, because I will never be on the cover of a magazine saying I'm the one that created this. And actually, when I see my super boss up there that actually talks on stage in a public event about the project that I started, saying that it was a big success, never naming me, is part of what I have, but that's the success, that it has become of someone else and of the institution. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Thank you. I love it. And I think it's really, really relevant for people to see how it's not so much of a solo journey. And it's so important to just get our egos out of the way and do our work for the benefit of the institution and for the benefit of our society, and not so much for like receiving that direct recognition, because it may not come. Yes. And Florencia, would you talk to us a little bit more about like the business case of social entrepreneurship, and how can an employee make that business case happen so that leaders in the organization or institution can actually support them?
Yeah, and thinking about that, I think I'm going to answer that question from two places. One
Sure.
is a couple of examples that may be useful in
Yeah.
how entrepreneurs have made the business case.
Perfect.
Uh, so I think like that can help also to now bring it to down to earth on what are type of examples of these. Um, Thinking of health, it came to me today like it's a very old example, but I think very tangible and clear, which is Miriam Sidibe is part of the League of Entrepreneurs.
Yes.
She used to work in Unilever in Kenya. And I always remember her because when we explored deeper her story, she had a PhD in public health,
Mm.
and she was very committed on public health and is committed until today. But I never forget when she said for her, a turning point in her life was accepting to work at Unilever and not to go into the public health system, thinking that that could be the place where she could reach more people, and
Mm.
that there was something for her to learn in working inside a corporation as a way to, because she was amazed of the marketing of Unilever. So she
Yeah.
was just like, if I can make that help children just use soap for their hands. Her big things were infectious diseases. And it
Yeah.
was just about cleaning and da, da, da. So she was just like, soap. And like, who sells soap? So I'm going to work with Unilever. And then they worked with Lifebuoy, which is that specific brand of Unilever that
Yes.
works with antibacterial. And then she would move all the marketing budget to be used to train and work in Africa with developing more support around moms and families, and then also working together with the public system. So that is how she did it. Now, how did she make the business case for Unilever? She
Right.
was very smart because what she did is she just went directly with the marketing people. So
Mm.
it was just like, you have a product that already has a component that is solving the infection, the antibacterial and infectious diseases. Today, that product is not accessible to everyone because you put it at a price that it cannot reach certain groups of people. So we need to find a way that you can sell this product and sell more, but we have to make sure that part of that money is coherent with the cost of this brand. So she just used the marketing budget as a way to reinforce the positioning and to use part of that money to make those soaps accessible to people that wouldn't buy them, and also to work on public campaigns. So it was a very interesting way on going directly in the same direction of the products and brands that your company has, and
Yes.
looking what are potential intersections with causes.
Mm.
Another way, just to bring another example on how to do the business case, there's a case in Peru that is not particularly health. Well, actually, it works with health, but from a very different perspective.
Mhm.
Fishery company just distributed fish, and then they would. What happened? There was twice a month. Maria Fernanda starts working inside the sustainability area of the company and public relations. She gets in there and realizes there is a donation that happens twice a month in the central area of Peru with people that would never buy fish and actually were not used to eat fish. And they would just go and bring this truck and donate it. And then the question she had was like, well, great, that's a social responsibility initiative, but I'm sure these people would benefit from eating fish, not only twice a month, but actually more, because it would improve their nutrition. Why can't we do that? Well, because it's not profitable. So we can't do that. And then she was like, but if we figured out how this can be profitable, and also uh, can we just work on that? So what happened is they created a distribution system
Mhm.
with support from public money and Inter-American Development Bank money. So
Mm.
there was co-financing to develop a distribution system that trained women to teach how to cook the fish and how to distribute it to those families. And then it became 10% of the sales of fish of the company over time. So
Wow.
it was that's the shift, I think, like how you can make the case in terms of this is not just going to be a donation, this is not just going to be a, but we are going to find a way to make this. And of course, the profit was less than they had in other lines of business, but it made sense. They had more fish. They could have, and it, of course, had the brand reputation and all of those benefits as well for the company. But it was, and I think it's interesting as well as you think as entrepreneurs, how you leverage not only the resources of your organization, but partner with others. So again, look outside and not only inside. Because one of the things we've learned over time is the more you start initiatives, bringing also players from outside, the more those initiatives sustain over time because they are less fragile when there are shifts in power inside the organization. Let's say this person that was supporting it leaves and we should kill this project. No, we cannot. We have all these partners, all this structure. So yeah, that's also proven as a smart way. So I think when you want to defend these ideas, you have to look for the business connection. You have to look also, well, one thing we were discussing, Natalie, and just to bring here, which, in essence, there's extrinsic motivation.
Right. Yeah, we were talking a little bit about that in the previous session. Yeah.
Well, like what stayed with you, like Natalie, with that? Maybe like where could we, yeah.
We were mentioning how there's like extrinsic motivations. So there's like some regulations for institutions that they have to comply in terms of like they have to comply with certain climate change or like health regulations. But there's like more like the intrinsic coming from like what feels right, right? From the entrepreneurs usually that they want to create change and make the things right. But unfortunately, there's some extrinsic motivations, but it works too. That's what we were like discussing a little bit, right?
Yeah, I guess that's where I was, because I mean, if you want to make the business case for these new ideas that you want to bring, we need to play with both.
Right.
Like it's extrinsic motivation. What is the current situation of your organization? Where are they having pressure in terms of social commitment, environmental commitments? What we were discussing is like, yes, it's interesting that over time, I don't know, for me working 20 years on we're looking for sustainable business and change, the pressure has become bigger, and even investors are asking companies what are they doing in terms of environment or in terms. So if you look at organizations, many times there are already external commitments. So just take a look at those reports. Be clear on what your organization is committing to and where there are risks that are extrinsic. Regulation has changed a lot. So what are the laws in place? So you knowing and being connected with those extrinsic motivations is very important in building the business case. Then there is the just, of course, the business motivations, which is just like we want to grow, we want to innovate, we want to develop new markets. So that's a good avenue. But then the intrinsic motivations, what we were saying is, in essence, there's some of us and people around that we just want to do it as a way of doing things differently, and not necessarily it's gonna pay the bill or make the business case 100%. And what I have learned over these years is just connect with people with intrinsic motivation and discover who are the other people in your organization that have this interest, this nudge, this thing that is moving them. As a good entrepreneur said, like, he was very financial oriented, right? He was a master of Excel spreadsheets, right? And he was just telling me, you know what I discovered? It doesn't matter. The best spreadsheet will not convince someone if they really don't want to do it. So what he had learned, being he was coming from finance, he would always do the business case, all the things, and his big learning was, I need to convince them from a different place.
Mm.
And that place is inviting them to risk together, to motivate, to do things. So it was interesting. His way of selling his idea the last time was he just sent fake news to his boss, saying that the competitor had done something that had received an award in Davos, was going to receive an award in Davos, because it was like this incredible new social business. And then the guy just came back saying, I cannot believe they did it and we didn't do it. Like, why didn't we ever think of this? And then he said, like, you see, we can do it. Actually, they didn't do it yet. But imagine we can be the ones doing it. So he just appealed to a different place, which is not just about the numbers and the usual business case.
Right. It has to do a lot with like also how you present it, right? I mean, the numbers are important. We need to have the hard data too, but it's also about like the presentation and communication skills, right? How do we communicate, tapping into like the personal interests of the person that you're trying to convince, I guess, right? Yes. Yeah. And I have here a question from somebody from the audience, and Balaski Kovacs. And also Davidson, Yesudara, and others. Actually, it seems like there's several people asking about talking about external factors and partners. Can you please share some of the best practices in social entrepreneurship, and also a little bit more about the advantages of social entrepreneurs working with nonprofits?
Well, I think first, best practices in social entrepreneurship. I think in essence, what we are trying to go deeper here together is on what you need to develop as an entrepreneur. So I would say first, there are things that you need to develop yourself to be a successful entrepreneur in your way of leading or your way of working. And that's where there's something about working on seeing possibilities. We call it generative thinking. Okay. So generative thinking is how you can build bridges and possibilities where others don't see it. So that's something to practice. When in this thing like Miriam trying to find ways of how can this Lifebuoy soap that is sold in an expensive price, can we make it access? So there's something about looking at those challenges and working on them creatively, right? So look at tensions. Look at those tensions and approach them with a creative perspective. And when we want to do this generative thinking, bringing people from outside is really useful sometimes because you get a different perspective, a different creative approach, bringing entrepreneurs to think about it and not just the people, you and the people in your organization. So that's very useful. Then, second thing for you to develop is that capacity of influencing others or working with others. So, yes, it has to do with how you communicate, it has to do with how you convey ideas, also how you invite others to be
Mm,
part of your idea.
mm,
So it's less about let me show you my great idea and let me sell it to you.
mhm,
It's also about how can we build this together. So unfinished ideas can take you further because you make people feel they are co-owners of the idea you're building. So then that's also things. So generative thinking, influencing and working with others, then being a master in understanding the business case for your organization.
mm,
So you need to study the core strategy, the objectives, the pressure, the externalities to be so aligned with your organization as to use the right language when you present those ideas, as to bring the right. So there's a lot to study and get really knowledgeable in your organization. And then, last but not least, build your social capital
mm,
inside and outside the organization. And what do I mean by this? If I get a new job in this organization and I have all this network outside, but I don't know anyone inside, right? My social capital inside the organization is zero.
mm,
What that means that my credibility inside the organization, my capacity to drive things inside this organization is very little because people don't know me and don't trust me. So even if I have the position, and of course, depending on the position you have, is how much you're going to be able to influence by your hierarchy, but not by your social capital.
mm,
So that is important. Be conscious on developing social capital inside and outside your organization. And then inside, of course, looking at people that you can connect with, not only your boss or your direct colleagues. It's interesting that you go beyond and
mm,
try to connect with people that you see can be interesting for the type of change you want to promote. And just develop a coffee, a lunch, going to an event. I don't know, just it's investing in your network. Now, when it comes to why is it important to have social capital outside and connections outside? Because it will give you a much better perspective on the problems you want to work on, um, and not need to reinvent the wheel in
mm,
trying to start new projects from scratch, which takes a lot of energy. While actually, there might be a nonprofit that is already doing something incredible. And probably what they don't have is resources and they don't have uh, scale. So many times you can bring a nonprofit with what they were developing as a source of either just expanding their work, or sometimes you cannot bring the work exactly the way they want to do it. And you can partner with them in a new initiative on how you can do this together uh, in a way that makes sense for both. Is it a joint venture? Is it a way that they are owners of the methodology? But you can, so there's many ways that you can think of on how to make this happen. Even in the case, for instance, of this fishery that I was talking about, the
mhm,
way this worked for the distribution system, they didn't do the distribution inside the company. What they did is they developed a new organization outside the company, together with existing nonprofits, to do the delivery of the fish. So it's important because if you are just sitting in your little world inside the organization, it's going to be tough. Uh, the more you expand your social capital and networks, and I always we have this question in one of the when you assess your entrepreneur profile, there's this question we ask in the league, which is just like, how much time do you dedicate outside of your organization.
Mm.
How
To
many
build
people?
relationships and
Yes,
yeah.
to build relationships. And just make sure you bring 20% of your time outside. And I know that's hard. I
Wow.
know,
Yeah.
depending on the position that you have. Uh, but just find ways to make that happen. And just be conscious. Map your current network.
Right.
Take a look at that. What is the balance of people you have? And then what two ways you can map it, which is interesting, is map it from the point of view of diversity. So
Mm.
how many people do you know from nonprofits or from communities or from things that are, I don't know, entrepreneurs that are doing something very radically innovative? So take a look at that. And then also another way to map it when it comes to social capital, who are people that trust you?
Mm.
Because if you want to do new things and you want to create change, you're going to ask people to trust you and to invest in you or to give you time to dedicate to that. So, just in the case of entrepreneurs, when you have a job and you have things you need to dedicate and off, and um, there's a question around like, how can you have more time?
Right.
Allocate to stuff that you want to do that is not necessarily part of your job description today. And for that to happen, you need to have some social capital inside, on someone trusting you and saying, well, you know what? Let's give more time for you to dedicate to this idea or this project.
Right. Have the support already so that they will allow you to dedicate that time.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. These are great best practices for social entrepreneurs to focus on. I think like they're very feel like core elements that people need to be aware of to be able to succeed and get their ideas out there in the world. And we also have another question about what are the most common challenges? And it might be related with the last thing that you were just saying, but what are the most common challenges that social entrepreneurs face in their journeys?
Well, I think many. The first one I would say is sometimes feeling you are all the time navigating against the current. You
Mm,
know?
yeah,
So one of the things we hear and hear repetitively is like you're given a job description, you're giving something to be done, and then that is going with the inertia of the organization, right? Just
right.
doing what is expected from you the way it is expected. Great, I'm navigating with the current. Everyone wants me to go this way. When we start challenging, creating new things, asking new ways, wanting to, you're going to make people uncomfortable
Mm,
and you're going to start getting, even just moving into not only my sector, but I want to talk with others. So you're going to start moving things in the organization. And that naturally, what happens will bring resistance of
right.
many people.
Breaking
So,
the status quo. Well, you're breaking the status quo, it creates like that tension and resistance. Yeah. Yeah.
which in a way, some people call it like you just mess up with the immune system of the organization. You know,
Right.
it's like a new bacteria got in. Let's kill it. Let's
Right.
because you're just messing up with our way of functioning. So, being in that position requires to be very connected on why you're doing the work you're doing.
Mm,
Because you're not necessarily gonna receive great job, well done, let's give you a promotion. No, many times you will be listening to no's or why do you care about this or that this is not your job or this is not where you should be putting your energy. So there's a very important internal work to do
mm,
to be very connected with why am I doing this work and what will be my way to measure my success,
right.
which does not rely on just receiving a raise or a promotion or a pat on my shoulder because I'm great. So that's a very typical challenge
Mm.
that you will face as an entrepreneur. And I would say it's ongoing. As some a good friend of mine says, because the day I stop receiving no, it means I'm not doing anything new.
Right.
So it's great. Just so you learn to live with the no. Great. Now, another thing that we've seen as a typical challenge is learning to live with the timing of the organization. So
Mm.
that's different from an entrepreneur. I mean, an entrepreneur, you have the timing of the market and everything. But in essence, there are moments that you need to learn how to play with the timing of your own organization. So I would say just learning to pause and wait 6 months because that's not the right time. And then in 6 months from now, it will be. And then that requires patience and that requires just learning how to read when is the right time to bring this and to whom and in what forum. And that requires living with your anxiety and like having to navigate things with patience. And sometimes this starts making you feel like then I'm not being good enough and da, da, da. But it's just learning to live with the time of the organization. If you measure how much time it took some of the most successful entrepreneurs take their ideas to real institutional support and scale, it was years, okay? Like 4 to 5 years.
Wow.
So this is not something you're gonna do in 6 months.
Right.
Or I mean, if you are sitting in that situation where you were given the invitation, because that's another thing, learn to look for your window of opportunity.
Mm.
There are moments when you're given windows of opportunity because you're given an invitation to work on something new. So that's part of the challenge. Like, how do I direct my energy in the right way inside the organization? And last but not least, um, I have heard it. One way to call it is you will need to become a chameleon. Chameleon, like
Yes.
the
Change of
the
color.
the
Yeah.
animal that shifts colors depending on the context and the environment, and that may feel a little bit like I'm not being authentic to who I am.
Mm.
Uh, but there's something about uh, learning as an entrepreneur to talk in different ways and to speak in the right way to connect with very different audiences that you will learn to do and you will need to be really good at to succeed. So there's something, and even this thing that we were saying on being able to be connected externally and then internally. So you may be using very different words, very different stories, and almost different clothes. No?
Right.
Oh, no, it's so just but be comfortable with it. You don't not need to just be uh, there's something about being so comfortable with what you're wanting to do that you can change a little bit your form. Uh, because that's not what's important. What's important is what the impact we want to bring. So sometimes I may be wearing a tie and being in the corporate event, and sometimes I will be in the community but I can play those roles because that's actually my bridging role in making this change at an institutional level and really bring scale.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you so much for all these different ideas of, how to face the challenges that are brought during this journey. And it's amazing, but time has really run out. We're really, really close to the end. So let's see if we can squeeze in one more question before we say goodbye. And that would be, how do you feel? Do you want to share a little bit of what the League of Entrepreneurs is currently doing? We have only a few more minutes. Would you
Well,
like?
to share, just to say, with the league, we always do Global Entrepreneur Week. So just take that, it's open, it's a moment of celebration of entrepreneurship. It's happening in October this year. It always happens in October. Okay, it's 14th to 18th. So that's happening, but still a little bit far away in time. But it would be great that you do some stuff and share and participate in Global Entrepreneur Week. Other things that we are doing is we're going deeper in some topics and some areas with our fellowship programs. So we're doing one on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and we're doing one on climate fellowship. And just to say, that's another invitation. I have to say, that climate has not been my closest background or environmental issues, and I'm more and more connected to them.
Mm.
And just an invitation or provocation. Um, One of the things that triggered my attention was 2 years ago talking with one of our entrepreneurs that works with AMREF,
Yes.
large nonprofit in Africa that works a lot with access to healthcare. And I was struck by, as they are building all their work and looking into their strategic focus for the next years, is climate adaptation. So it's like considering we're not going, I mean, we're already living it and it's coming, just we are going to face lots of issues because of all this climate change, which directly impacts the health, and especially of the most vulnerable populations in places that are mostly struck by all this climate change, both in terms of lack of rain, in terms of flooding, and lots of infections and longer times with not the right places. So just to nudge here and just be aware as you are looking in where you can act and where you can bring change. Not only focus on the usual, but just sometimes this more holistic perspective on how things intersect and where we can be innovative and bring new perspectives. So she was telling me the ministers of health and all the health ministries were not at all prepared.
Mm.
uh, so it's so interesting, right? I don't know, it feels like a big avenue of looking into how all this climate change will be impacting on our health and just prepare ourselves. And we know the most vulnerable populations are always the ones that are hit mostly.
Totally, totally. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Florencia. And I'm sorry we're really going to have to end now, but it's been really, really amazing to speak with you. And maybe just very briefly, like maybe just one sentence, what advice would you give to the people that are watching us today?
Just do. Start doing something. Because we can, it's not the best idea, it's not the perfect initiative. It's just start moving the needle. That's what's important. And then it's a practice. It's a practice, and you start getting more people, and just be connected with people that give you energy.
I love
That's,
that.
that's important. I forgot to say that. And that's very important. That's why we built the league. And it's incredible. You have all this cohort and group together with you in this journey. So make the most out of it. This is an opportunity a window of opportunity you're having right now.
Totally,
Do
totally.
it. And
Thank you
yeah,
so much, Florencia. Thank you. It's been really great. Another session with you, sharing all your knowledge, your insights, your experiences. And thank you also, everyone, for joining us today. We're very excited to have you on board of the Social Entrepreneurship for Innovation in Health course. We already have been really enjoying so much reading your comments on the discussion forums. Your opinions and your personal experiences really enrich the platform. So thank you so much for doing that. And if you're watching us live, I would like to remind you to click yes to the survey that you're watching live so you can receive the extra points. We'll see you next week on April 18th with an incredible guest expert, Tony Joy, to work on Module 2 of the course. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.